Hey friends, thanks for stopping by. It's Laurie. Let's go make a Patriotic Gnome Wreath. I'm using mostly Dollar Tree supplies and I'm starting with the 14-inch wire wreath frame. If you're following along with me, you'll need 24 chenille stems, and I'm using this silver color because I already had these on hand. And then I'm also using 3 of the white Dollar Tree table runners. I'm adding chenille stems around the frame evenly, so I'm starting on the outside and I'm folding one stem over the 2 outer supports, and then I'm twisting it into place. When I'm adding my second stem, I'm not measuring the distance between the two. I'm kind of eyeballing it and I'm just keeping even spacing between the stems as I work my way around the form. I kept working my way around until all 6 sections had 2 stems equally spaced on the outer 2 wires. With my stems attached and complete on the outside, it's now time to attach them to the 2 inside wires. I want the stems to offset each other, so I'm placing one of them on the side support, and then I'm placing the other between the 2 outside stems. I continued adding my stems on the 2 inside wires, one on the support, and then one in between the 2 chenille stems on the outside wires. Try to keep them as evenly spaced as possible, but if they're not perfect, not to worry, because on this wreath, it's not going to make that big of a difference. When I was finally done, I had all 24 of the chenille stems attached to my wreath form. My chenille stems never stayed tightly in place, with the exception of the ones that I wrapped around the side support. So I'm turning my wreath over, and using my glue gun, I'm just adding a dot of glue to the back of each of the stems. With that all complete, it's now time to add on the table runners. Both of the ends are sewn into points, so I'm folding over one end, and then I'm bunching up about 3 or 4 inches, and then using a small piece of floral wire, I'm attaching the 2 pieces together. To make the ruffles, it's important to always keep the 2 side pieces of the fabric together. These 2 pieces will meet on the bottom of the wreath, and by keeping them together, this is what will allow us to make some ruffles. To get my wreath started, I'm taking the end of the fabric and I'm tucking it under one of the side supports on the 2 outside wires. When I'm done, I'm then placing my fabric into the next chenille stem on the outside, and then I'm just twisting it into place. Making sure that both side pieces are meeting together on the bottom, I'm then measuring out 8 inches of fabric. I then bunch the fabric up and attach it to the next chenille stem. And by doing this, I have my first ruffle. To make my next ruffle, I'm following the same instructions. I'm making sure that both of the side pieces meet together on the bottom. I'm measuring out 8 inches, and then I'm bunching it together and attaching it to the next chenille stem. After my first 2 ruffles were attached, I then followed the same instructions. I measured out 8 inches of fabric and then attached it to the next chenille stem on the form. When I come to the end of the fabric, I have enough to make one more ruffle with a little extra left over. Before I attach my fabric in place, I'm using a piece of floral wire and I'm attaching the end piece together. When I'm done, I add the piece of fabric to the chenille stem, and then I tuck the little bit of extra fabric down between the 2 wires. To add my second table runner, I follow the same instructions. I fold over the end and I add on my floral wire. This time I'm placing my end under the last ruffle, and then I'm attaching the fabric by sharing the last ruffle's chenille stem, and I'm twisting it into place. From there, I make sure that both ends of the fabric are meeting on the bottom. I measure out my 8 inches and then attach it to the next chenille stem, and I just continue around until I complete my circle. To finish off my outside ruffles, I'm measuring my 8 inches of fabric, and then I'm attaching it to the first ruffle, sharing the same chenille stem. I'm adding my fabric to the center, but this time I'm measuring it at 6 inches. Once I have it measured, I'm then gathering it and I'm attaching it to the closest chenille stem in the center. I measure off my last 6 inches, and then I tie off the end of the fabric with some wire, attach my last ruffle, and tuck the end under the 2 wires. To finish up my wreath, I'm adding the 3rd table runner, and once again, I'm just folding over the end, tying it together with some floral wire, tucking it behind the last ruffle, and then adding the fabric to the chenille stem. And then I just continued on around the wreath until it was completely full. When I was done, I worked my way around the wreath, opening up all the ruffles. With all my ruffles complete, I folded over the chenille stems that were sticking up on the top. I just folded them down around and twisted them together on the bottom. I'm adding 4 different ribbon accents on my wreath. I'm using this pretty red, white, and blue that I found at Walmart, this pretty sheer red ribbon that I had on hand, some stars and stripes ribbon that I found at Dollar Tree, and this navy blue sheer ribbon that I also had on hand. I'm cutting each of my 4 ribbons 8 times at 10 inches each. With all my ribbons cut, I'm dovetailing each of the ends, and this is super easy. All you do is fold the ribbon in half and then cut away at an angle. And I ended up doing this to all 32 of my ribbons. With all my ribbons cut and dovetailed, I'm going to use a piece of floral wire to attach them together. I'm putting my 8 bunches of ribbon together. I'm keeping the navy blue on the bottom, the red always in the middle, but I'm having 4 stars and stripe on the top, and then 4 red, white, and blue on the top as well. Once I have them grouped in 4s, I then fold the ribbons in half to find my center point, and then I just attach them together with a piece of floral wire. And I just continued making my ribbons until I had 8 sets. I'm also using some red tulle from the Dollar Tree to decorate my wreath. I don't have any blue, so I'm going to be spraying some of the white tulle with this navy blue spray paint. It comes out really nice, and when I was done, I cut 8 10-inch pieces of the red and the blue. I'm also using some of the Dollar Tree red, white, and blue mesh, and I'm cutting 8 10-inch pieces as well. I'm going to attach them all together by using some half pieces of my floral wire. I'm folding each side of my mesh curl into the center, and then I'm holding it together with a clip. I'm taking 1 piece of my red and blue tulle, and I'm gathering them in the center. I'm then adding in my Patriotic mesh, and I'm attaching them all together with a piece of floral wire. And after I made my first bunch, I then made 7 more. With both sets of my ribbons and my tulle bunches complete, it's now time to add them to the wreath. I'm starting with my stars and stripes ribbons first, and to evenly space them around the wreath, I'm going to place them directly across from each other. I'm wrapping my wires over the chenille stem, I'm turning over my wreath, and then twisting the two wires together on the bottom. When my first ribbon is in place, I'm following the exact same instructions, and this time I'm placing my second ribbon directly across from my first. When I'm done, I'm now adding my next two ribbons, and once again, I'm placing them directly across from each other. With these ribbons all in place, I'm now adding on my red, white, and blue striped ribbons. And just like I did with my first ribbons, to keep them evenly spaced, I'm adding them directly across from each other. With all my ribbons attached in place, I'm now going to add in my tulle and mesh clusters. And once again, just like my ribbons, and to keep everything evenly spaced, I'm placing one across from the other until I have all 8 of them in place. When I finally add my last cluster, the wreath is now complete. I'm adding a Dollar Tree confetti wreath to the center of my wreath, and this will give me a solid platform to attach my gnome. I placed it in the center, and then I used 4 pieces of floral wire to attach it to my wreath. With my wreath finally done, I went around and I just fluffed up the ribbons and the tulle bunches. After all that work, we're going to set the wreath aside, and now it's time to make the gnome. For the base of my gnome, I'm using one of the smaller wreath rings from the Dollar Tree. This will be the base for his head, so I'm bending in both of the sides to give me kind of a cone type shape. I found this fun red and blue star fabric at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use this for his hat. I have my fabric open, and I'm going to fold both of the corners into a point. So because the fabric is not a perfect square, there's some extra fabric on the side, and I'm just using my scissors to cut it away. After I did it on one side, I then did the same on the other. To make the hat, I'm now folding the two right sides together to make a triangle. I'm going to attach the fabric together using my glue gun, but if you have a sewing machine, that will work just as well. After my first side is done, I turn my fabric around, and now I'm attaching the second side. This time though, I'm making sure to leave about a 4-inch opening on the bottom. With my fabric attached together, I'm now turning the hat inside out. To give my hat some body, I'm going to use a large handful of some polyfill, and I'm going to stuff it in the opening that I left on the corner. With my hat all stuffed, I'm now going to be wrapping it around the small ring that I bent. Before I add it, I'm recycling these 2 wooden skewers, and these are where the nose will sit. And what I'm doing is I'm placing them between the 2 wire supports, and I'm hot gluing them into place. I then cut off the extra ends. For my gnome's nose, I'm using this large styrofoam ball, and I'm painting it with some coral colored acrylic paint. When it was dry, I then used my glue gun to attach it into place. To attach my hat, I'm placing a line of hot glue over my gnome's nose, and then I'm placing the fabric right on top of it. I'm then taking the 2 sides of my hat, and I'm wrapping them tightly around the back of the form. I added a generous amount of hot glue to the back of the nose, and then I wrapped my fabric around it. On the back of the hat, and I've done this for all the other gnomes that I've made, I'm pulling the fabric tightly together and I'm hot gluing it to make a seam. Make sure when you're working with your glue gun that you always protect your fingers so you don't get burned. With my hat attached, I then removed the bottom half of the wire using my bolt cutters. For the beard, I'm using this bright red hair that I found in the toy department at the Dollar Tree. I carefully removed it from the plastic hairband. To attach the beard, I added some hot glue to the lower part of the nose, and then I attached it into place. To embellish my gnome, I found these stars in a multi-pack at the Dollar Tree, and I'm painting them with my red, white, and blue acrylic paint. When they were dry, I used my glue gun and I added 2 white and 1 blue to his beard. Once they were in place, I then added my large blue star to his hat. I'm using this red and white Dollar Tree gingham ribbon, and I'm just making a simple bow that I'm going to add to the center of the star. I then followed up by adding a red star in the center. To give my hat a little bend, I'm adding some hot glue to the side of the hat and I'm folding it over. I'm using the red, white, and blue Mardi Gras beads from the Dollar Tree to accent the front of the hat. Using my hot glue gun, I attached them onto the front and the sides. If you like gnomes and patriotic wreaths made from supplies from the Dollar Tree, make sure to check out both of my playlists. I'll have them linked below in my description. When I had them all in place, I then glued both sides to the back and I just snipped off the extra beads. I attached my last red and blue star on the tip of his hat. In memory of my mom, who was born on Flag Day, and that was always a special day in our home, I'm adding a little American flag to the gnome's hat. With my wreath and my gnome finally complete, it's now time to add the two together. I place my gnome in the center of the wreath, and when he's exactly perfect, I then use my glue gun to attach him in place. I'm tucking in this American flag that I found at the Dollar Tree. To finish up, I'm using this USA sign that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I'm hot gluing it to the side of my wreath. And with that, my patriotic gnome wreath is complete. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me, and I hope you enjoyed making this wreath. If you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed and you think, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I will see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.